It gives me great pleasure to have Mr. Vivek Sundar, the Chief Operating Officer of Swiggy, on this morning's webinar. I thank each one and all of you for coming on to this webinar. I hope all of you would enjoy this program and there will be a lot of learning and takeaways from this. I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Vivek Sundar. Vivek is currently Swiggy's business operations as COO since July 2018. Prior to that, he led the Procter & Gamble business in East Africa based out of Nairobi. He had been with Procter & Gamble for 20 years in various capacities, including commercial director in India, the regional director for a Pan-Asia team based in Singapore, category leader in the United Kingdom, and the team leader in Thailand. In Swiggy, he has led the efforts to scale the company across cities. Swiggy is in 30 cities today versus 300 cities today versus 12 months ago. He is also leading the structure for faster and better decision so that the company continues to operate like a nimble startup while it scales. During this, while preserving the good parts of the culture is a challenge that keeps Vivek busy 24/7. Vivek is passionate about building organizational capacity and has had a long track record of creating better businesses results via more capable teams. He has done so in diverse teams spanning 20 nationalities and has done in diverse roles, internal consulting assignments, new country startups, as well as traditional business unit jobs. He also loves to play at the intersection of technology and business and has been an early adopter and innovator of big data analytics across many sales and marketing roles. He is equally wary of the pitfalls of reliance on quantitative data without understanding behavioral economics and cognitive biases. Vivek is a graduate of the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and prior to that, he studied computer engineering from Delhi University. He's a regular guest lecturer at his alma mater, IIM Calcutta, and at other premier business schools across the world, where he teaches and shares business expertise. He has an excellent view on cross-cultural working, and which he honed via working abroad and learning 3 foreign languages in addition to the Indian languages that he learned growing up in India. Welcome, Vivek.
Thank you, sir. And thank you very much for such a long and effusive welcome. Sometimes it feels a bit embarrassing. Should you smile? Should you basically hide your head when you're doing such an introduction? But really, really appreciate. I am really, really pleased that the group actually is very, very diverse. As I understand, it includes people from the Akshaya family, as well as from the client network. It also includes other people who are not professionally or business-wise associated with the group. So I think this level of audience diversity is both scary because you're trying to create a communication that will work for such a diverse audience, but at the same time exciting. Normally, when I'm speaking to a school of business school students, it's relatively easy. They're all sort of, within a certain narrow boundary conditions of what they know, what they're interested in, and so on and so forth. So age diversity, type of job diversity, experience diversity is a wonderful thing, but I'm going to try to therefore give a common minimum message and then hope that the diversity of the audience in terms of what their questions are comes through in the Q&A. So, to start with, your group has left an incredibly favorable impression on me because it's so easy in this world of Zoom to just sort of say, log in guys, and let's just start the work. The invite was 15 minutes earlier for everybody. Everybody was on time. When I logged in, I saw 130 people. I'm so used to Zoom conferences when you log in and people are still sort of ping, ping, ping logging in. And I think others did a brilliant job of laying out the simple house rules that need to be true. So I think, if anything, even though you may be a company that predates the digital era, you've clearly brought in good processes even to what is entirely a digital process of virtual meetings. So my first impressions are already very positive on what Mr. Adarsh did. So thank you for sort of, making me happy as a person just entering the room, the virtual room, as it were. So I'm actually here to talk. I decided to not do a PowerPoint. Also, there's so many people here because, I'm sure people are tired of PowerPoints. I'm going to do it from what is called the experiences that I've had. So it's essentially the story of Swiggy over the last 6 years, but more precisely how we have dealt with the crisis over the last 1.5 years. And it's so funny. I'm sure there's some sort of karma in this. But on the day I choose to meet with you, I get an email in my inbox which says Mercedes 2021 model. Mercedes-Benz India announces a new retail model, blah, blah, blah. The new model of selling will reduce inventory of plants and basically be a direct-to-consumer model. Right now, I don't know what it means. I'm not in your industry, but clearly looks like there is some COVID-related sort of disruption or change of business anyway coming into your industry too. And I'm sure you have more knowledge about it, but it is funny when I think about the way we've been disrupted through COVID. On the same day, I actually get an email about some changes coming in that front. So what I'll do is I will maybe do this in Adarsh, since you're the MC, I wanted to know what would be, given the size of the audience, do you think it's fair that we do sort of, I mean, this slot is till 12 p.m. So that's sort of 50 minutes from now. Do you think it's fair that we give 20 or 25 minutes or so for questions?
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes is good enough.
It's a large group. That's why I'm saying this.
We will have the questions come in. If the question increases in the chat box, then we'll sound you off, sir.
Okay, just sound me out, but I'm not looking at the chat. I've sort of minimized
Yes,
the chat.
I will have a watch on it.
Okay, thank you. So let me give you, by the way, many of you may be customers of Swiggy. I mean, I see lots of young people, old people, etc. So I'm sure you're customers, and now you're locked in, so you don't have a choice but to be customers. So in that sense, I'm sure you have lots of good experiences, but equally, I'm sure each of you has some hair-pulling experiences of delivery not happening or the food not being up to mark and so on and so forth. So one clarification, I can answer any question about Swiggy except if last night's order was messed up. We had a massive night last night. I'm sure lots of people had their order messed up, but I can't do call center work in this meeting. But I'm sure you will agree that we do it right most of the time. But obviously in some cases, and by the way, that cases are in the thousands every day, we do mess up. So sorry about that, is what I'd say. So let me talk a little bit about the customer centricity that we've tried to build in Swiggy. And let me sort of split it into two parts. The two parts of the story are the birth of Swiggy and the existential crisis during lockdown 2020. Because at some point of time, our business was down to zero in 2020. Zero, right? Literally, we were doing 0 orders on one of the days of 2020. So when you basically grow your business to over a couple of $1 billion of GMV, and then it grinds to a halt and gets to 0, and you don't know when it's going to end, you just realize, oh my God, what do I do with all these people and all these buildings and all these offices? So we have had, in that sense, a near-death experience. So I just want to talk about the birth of Swiggy and then the near-death experience of Swiggy in 2020, which is now only about a year old. So birth of Swiggy is simple. It is a 2014 story. And so I want to give a couple of interesting points that maybe people don't know. First, we were not the first food delivery company. Okay, in digital commerce, first mover advantage, flywheel, all of those things is a big thing. I mean, when you have customers, I mean, you look at the challenge Koo has to challenge Twitter, right? I mean, Twitter has so many people that you kind of tend to be on it because everybody that you know is on Twitter. So there's a network effect. So there is a big problem called network effect, which is there. So if you are not the first mover, it is extremely difficult to dislodge the incumbent. And we were, I think, number 6 in a crowded field. There were 40 food delivery companies across the major cities of India in 2014. And we were number 6. I mean, 6th in terms of when we had opened. And also we were bootstrapped. It's not like some, secret angel had given us millions of dollars. And so therefore we had all the advantages. Essentially, the only thing the founders had was a passion to do what works for the customer and be intensely customer centric. And we felt that that would take care of this problem that we have of first mover advantage or disadvantage and so on and so forth. And technology wasn't even the first thing we focused on. For perspective, and I don't know how many of you know that, some of you in Bangalore, in Koramangala might know this, but for the first 6 months, Swiggy ran without an app. It ran with 3 WhatsApps. A WhatsApp from the customer to Swiggy, a WhatsApp from Swiggy to the delivery boy or girl, and a WhatsApp from Swiggy to the restaurant to make sure that the orders are being transmitted to the restaurants. Right now, this is not business WhatsApp. This is not any of the cool features of WhatsApp where you can choose and all of that. Regular consumer WhatsApp, right? And for 6 months, which in the digital world is a lifetime, we ran with WhatsApp before we created the first app. And millions of consumers today would know it as an app and a technology company and so on and so forth. But the core of it was the following. And I just wanted to point out the insight that we had gathered about food delivery in India that we were trying to do. Remember, food delivery wasn't invented by Swiggy, nor were we the first company. Domino's has been delivering food for over 30 years in a systematic manner. A lot of local restaurants, I'm sure, will give you your phone number and you can basically WhatsApp them and phone them to deliver food. So we did not invent food delivery. But we basically had an understanding of what the key pain points were to unlock exponential growth. Because it was just a small side business for restaurants, right? And it was a core business for Domino's, but it was only one cuisine or one type of restaurants. So what was the problem? The first problem was that of choice. Not every restaurant had food delivery. You know that, right? And even if they did it, there would be constraints. What would the constraints be? You can't basically place an order for 50 rupees from a restaurant if you want. You couldn't, right? There was a minimum order that was there. There was also a minimum radius that was there. You couldn't place an order. I don't know. I know this group is largely from South India. So if I were to take, I'm going to maybe then keep spanning examples from South India. So if I take a Bangalore example, if you're sitting in Whitefield, you couldn't have ordered food from Jayanagar. You just couldn't have in the pre-Swiggy era, right? So everybody so which means what? The diversity of restaurants in terms of who allows food and the diversity of restaurants on even those who allow, how far do they allow, meant that customer choice was extremely restricted. If choice is restricted, you're not going to have category grow, because if choice is restricted, more customers will say, I don't get what I want, and therefore why should I go to this service or store, right? So choice was restricted. That was the first fact. The second problem was friction, and the friction that was there and the customer experience being variable. And I'm sure you'll know this. You have, I'm sure, hundreds of salespeople dealing with thousands and millions of clients. The experience was variable. And what do I mean by that? Some restaurants may give you fantastic delivery that when you place an order, the Ramu or whoever is the little store boy will be sent and he'll be very reliable and he'll come to the house and the food won't have spilled and everything would be fine. Some other restaurants, you will call up and see, you'll say, but he's left and he has to deliver 2 more and it's all over the place, right? In some other cases, the restaurant will call up and say, sorry, all my boys are out. I don't have any spare boys. I'll send it to you in half an hour, right? So when you have a situation where the delivery itself is a bit of a hit miss, the service is a bit of a hit miss, then customers don't adopt that service. You never adopt a service and basically change your habit if it's variable. Okay, if it's variable, meaning the quality is variable. So that was the second insight. And the third insight we had was that a lot of restaurants don't know how to reach their consumers. So there's a lot of awareness issue. I mean, many of you will know restaurants only if somebody recommends it, or you're passing by and you see it, or there's a flyer in your. There is no way for a restaurant to reach out to millions of consumers through a nice appified or digital experience. So restaurants also didn't have a means to reach out to millions of customers. If I'm a large restaurant like Domino's or Truffles, sure, I have marketing money. But if I don't, then I don't have the ability. So when you put all of these, I'm not going to go through the full list, but there was a lot of friction points that were there in the delivery business. So we said, if we use process, people, and technology, and remember, we put technology right in the end back then because we didn't have the money to invest in an app, and invest in solving the customer pain points, we think that the category will grow. When the category explodes, you can get a much bigger, if you are the company that basically makes the category explode, you normally have an advantage that lasts years and decades. Many of us know about the work that a Colgate did back in the 30s about teaching people how to brush using a brush and a toothpaste. right? From either non-brushing habits or using, more traditional methods. And that's the role that they had. I mean, they used to basically go to villages and teach people how to brush and basically give, brushes for free and all of that. What were they doing? They were essentially creating a habit and therefore a category. When that category was created, of course, the pie expands. When the pie expands, you being the leader of that transformation journey, get the majority share of it. It's the same story with my previous company with Pampers and, let's say, feminine protection, which is Whisper, which is let's say in 1990, which is not that long ago, less than 5 out of 100 menstruating women used to use any pads. Okay, that was as low as that. Now, if you're going to try to find market share within that 5, then fine, you'll fight with Johnson & Johnson, and maybe you'll get a 50% market share. But 50% of 5 ladies is very small. You're better off in making the pie bigger. And even if you have a 30% of that bigger pie, it's a much bigger business and a much more vibrant business. So the investment that was made was on menstrual hygiene in schools, menstrual hygiene through primary health centers, doctors, etc. And when people basically gotten into the hygiene habit, the feminine hygiene habit of using sanitary napkins, then of course the category exploded because Whisper exploded it. Today that number is 10 or 15 times bigger. So blitzscaling, usually you will find companies that are actually creating a habit. I mean, Google did that with search to the extent that it becomes a verb, right? You say you Google for something. In India, people say that, if you want something, why don't you Swiggy it? So you've become a verb because you've basically been the one who's created the category. I mean, logically, it should have been, why don't you Domino's it? Because Domino's is the one who actually had created the habit of food ordering. But because we removed frictions across millions and millions of consumers, we became synonymous with it. And so over time, what happened was, the 40 people got whittled down to 4. Back in 2018, there were famously only 4 people playing in the food delivery business. There was Food Panda, Uber Eats, Zomato, and switched to Zomato, and Food Panda shut down. And therefore, you now only have 2 players. And of course, it's a much bigger pie that we are all having. So that's, I think, the first sort of part of the journey that I want to talk about is the birth of Swiggy, which is nothing spectacular of ordering, but the devil lies in the detail of understanding what was the problems with consumers, and that was causing the category to be small. And therefore, when we attacked the category problem, and we were the people who attacked the category problem, then the pie expanded big, and we basically got a lion's share of that. So from a 40-member field, barely any market share, 3 delivery guys in Koramangala, that's how we started on WhatsApp. We are today India's biggest food delivery player. And I'm going to basically stop this story on 20th February, or maybe not 20th February, 28th February of 2020, because that's when we had heard about COVID cases. But remember, and I'm sure most of us remember, we had heard about COVID cases and stuff like that, but there was no lockdown yet. It was still only, you were seeing ghastly stories in China and Italy and other places like that, but it hadn't landed here because obviously all that, the explosion hadn't happened. So till that point of time, we had basically grown our business to be number 1. We had 3 lakh delivery partners delivering food every day, which is, a very, very large fleet. I mean, if you just look at it, it would be amongst the largest consumer-facing company or fleet ever, across India put together. We were in 550 cities, and we had done 530 out of those 550 cities in the last 18 months prior to 2020 February, which means we had completely blitzscaled, right? We had not done organic growth. If you're basically doing organic growth, you're not going to get the story of how we did those city expansions is also intensely customer centric. We asked consumers who had downloaded the app in cities that we didn't even know existed on the map. And we said, hey, you seem to have downloaded the app. We are sorry you're not available in your city yet. Could you tell us what kind of restaurants you are interested in? And when we enter, we will try to make sure that we bring those restaurants on board. Because if somebody were to tell us that, in Karimnagar, in Telangana, these are the restaurants that should be on because consumers like that, how would we know that sitting here? I mean, Google is not great when you go to tier 3 and tier 4 India. Neither are the traffic information great, nor are the information about stores and restaurants. So we actually crowdsourced the information on how many customers are willing to be our customers in these cities, how many cities are they present in, because remember they downloaded the app and registered, and therefore it was completely customer backwards. We also asked them which restaurants you'd like to keep on, so we didn't need to worry about sending somebody. And therefore we basically then reached out to those restaurants while sitting in Bangalore, and we said, look, people have expressed an interest in getting food from you delivered in your city, right? And therefore we would like to onboard you virtually. This is a very important thing, because when we did that, we did it because we needed to blitz scale. But when lockdown happened, that skill set that we had built of basically having a commercial relationship and signing a contract with a mom and pop store, not a professional outlet, while being remote, was immensely useful. So just remember that. But reality is that as a result, we were able to grow from 8 cities, which was in 2018, to 550 cities by the time lockdown hit. We could not have done it by sending people. We just physically could not have sent people to these cities and built them. It was entirely customer backward. In some cities which have very high student population, we appointed some of these students as the CEOs of the cities, saying, hey, you are obviously very smart and you obviously have a desire to do an internship. How about we flip the internship on the head and you actually be the CEO of Swiggy in your city, and you start Swiggy. We'll bring you in for 4 days to train you, and so that you understand how things work. They're smart, they're young, digitally savvy. And we said, go back and start Swiggy in your city, because we don't know really what restaurants are important. And we also don't know what time zones are important. How can I, sitting here, know which is the timing where consumers have exams, in this case, the university, and therefore need night canteen or therefore need night service of restaurants? So I can't sit here and know that. So if an educational town like, let's say, Vellore or even Manipal is basically, having exams, and therefore the students are going to be needing night food, I don't know that sitting here, but the students who are CEOs will know that. They also know when the summer vacations are, or when this college is on vacation, and where there was going to be no business. So we basically outsourced it. And through this process of bringing customers into this process, of course, armed with technology, we were able to scale. So that's the journey, right? So all looks good. We have scaled our business. We have also delivered some, we are clearly India's #1, food delivery business. We have, in fact, in terms of app downloads, we are one of the world's biggest apps, even though we are still sitting only in one country, because the food delivery business is intensely high frequency, right? We talk about Amazon and Flipkart. Let me give you an interesting perspective. The person who would be considered a frequent user, the cohort of users called frequent users on Amazon, would be considered a low frequency user for Swiggy, right? A low frequency user for Swiggy would be somebody who's doing maybe 10 orders. By the way, in Flipkart, Amazon, etc., if you're doing more than 15 orders a year, which means more than 1 order a month, you're considered for high frequency. Right? Because the vast majority are not going to buy mobile phones every month, right? I mean, of course, millions of mobile phones are bought, but who's buying mobile phones every month? So their high frequency, somebody who's placing 1 order a month for us is extremely low frequency. Our high frequency users are placing as many orders in a month as that are placing orders in Amazon and Flipkart in a year. In fact, some of our highest frequency users, I don't know if any of the 100 odd people that are on this call are part of that, but our higher frequency users are placing 100 orders a month. I mean, I bow my heads in shame to those people. I myself never order that much. Right. And I work for the company, right? These are people who have completely obsoleted the kitchens in their homes. They don't have kitchens, right? You can basically guess that if you go and, in fact, it's an interesting one. If you go and ask a real estate agent that says, how many people are asking you once you have given them the home, like new migrant, right? A new migrant has moved from some university and has started a new job here. How many of you have also asked you to give you the sort of contact numbers for a local gas connection or for a local, cook or a maid? And if you go and ask that person saying, and many of the real estate agents these days will say they've not asked us. 5 years ago, it's impossible that anybody would be moving into a house and would not asking you for contacts of a gas connection or contacts of a maid. But today there are some people who have not asked these real estate agents. So then we know that in this building, there's a lot of Swiggy people who are basically have obsoleted the kitchen. So they probably have a microwave or something, but otherwise they don't have a functioning kitchen, right? So that's the journey till 2020, and everything was good. We had lots of money in the bank. We have a lot of, good investors. Everybody's seeming happy. And now we are saying, okay, we have scale. Now let's go after economies of scale, which is the natural stage of any business that scales, right? You first scale and build scale and make sure that you have a competitive advantage, and then you bring economies of scale in. And then, of course, you have the famous Janta curfew. Some of us will remember that date because I'm sure that is the date we won't want to forget, where everything was shut down. There was a lot of confusion, and therefore, on the day of Janta curfew, it was fine because there was still some confusion. But when the actual lockdown began, which was, I think, a week after that or 4-5 days after that, our business is down to zero, right? Because of two reasons. COVID cases had spiked. Lots of consumers had said, I don't know whether I'm going to get COVID through food. I don't know whether I'm going to get COVID through packaging, which is the outer packaging. Or I don't know if I'm going to get COVID through that delivery boy who's coming into my house. So 3 risk factors, forget it. I'm not ordering. Second factor was government saying, shut down, you're not essential. Food delivery, let's be honest, everybody is being forced at home. You don't need to order outside food. Restaurants were forced to shut. Restaurant staff were difficult to come by. The restaurant supply chain was disrupted. So the month of March, for those of us who are more literally inclined, was worse than the Ides of March. It's horrible. Okay. And at that point of time, I remember, board and all the investors going jittery and saying, okay, this is like, we have to shut down. We can't have such a large office and, infrastructure and everything else if you're not going to have a business. So basically just, shrink in and so on and so forth. And I remember when the dust was settling and we were obviously having to start talking to governments and people, governments also realized that these are essential service workers. So if you notice, the PM's message actually included police and health service workers, but it also included delivery boys. We hinged on that and we said, look, you've called people to say sit in at home, and you've said we'll deliver home for those who can deliver home, those who can get food delivery home, which is non-rural. We will make sure that we are going to provide that essential service. So please allow us to operate. Now, it wasn't as simple because of our federal structure. Ministry of Home Affairs gives guidance, but of course, every state wants to interpret it in its own way. So we still had to get the MHA guidance on food delivery being allowed, and then go state by state and make sure that we are still allowed to operate. Up until 2 months after that first lockdown, till May, some state governments had still not given us permission to operate. So there were some states where food was shut for 3 months after the lockdown, like Punjab or a few other states. Some other states like Karnataka very quickly realized that this is a good thing to keep people in. So they had given sort of permissions, but they were giving e-passes. Many of us who live here would know that there were e-passes available and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your staff would be aware of that. So with e-passes and a whole bunch of things, we started operating. Now, while we have gotten over the operating issue, the operational issue of being able to operate, what we have is a consumer problem. Consumers are not willing to order. Even after we had authority to operate in most of the country, 80% of consumers were what we defined as a new segment of consumers. I mean, of course, we do segmentation, right? Because we're a consumer-centric organization. 80% of consumers had either not opened the app or had opened it and basically shut it without placing a single order. And most of them were people who had never opened the app because they were spooked. So we created a new segment of users. Back then, to have segments called, active users, passive users, dormant users, blah, 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 right? We created a new segment of users, which was formally called COVID dormant, but informally was called COVID spooked. These were people who were spooked with COVID. They were so spooked that they felt that they'll get COVID even by opening the app, right? So now, here is the problem. It's a classical problem of, okay, all the research and insight is telling us that they're fearing, remember there was all these exchanges happening. How long does the virus stay on newspapers? How long does the virus stay on cardboards? Can viruses spread through cooked food? All of that stuff was happening. WhatsApp University was educating a whole bunch of Indians on various aspects that they should never use WhatsApp University for. So we had information, misinformation, all put into one bisibele bath and fed to consumers. And that is the reality. And by the way, even on vaccine, this is the same problem that is happening. The level of vaccine hesitancy is because we are giving free vaccine to our delivery partners, but in certain states, 45-50% of the delivery boys and girls are not even coming for vaccination when we are paying for it 1,500, 2,000 rupees per vaccine. But so the power of WhatsApp University to depress and misinform is immense, but that is the reality of the consumers. So we said, look, that's the reality of it. So let's now think about how do we educate them. Now, this is a very left brain in engineering and MBA, smart, analytical bunch of people. So we said, okay, let's educate them on the fact that you cannot get COVID through cardboard. You cannot get COVID through pizzas, but you cannot get COVID if the guy is going to do contactless delivery. If he's going to be more than 2 feet away, wearing a mask, you're not going to get COVID, and so on and so forth. But consumers didn't listen. They just didn't listen. We had doctors in the videos that we sent out saying you're not going to get COVID through the cardboard box, and anyway you can basically shove the pizza back in a microwave and heat it, and any viruses that are there will get killed. Anyway, the oven is 400 degrees Fahrenheit. COVID can't survive there, but people didn't believe. In fact, some of you will remember in Delhi there was this scare of a pizza delivery boy having COVID back in May 2020. You can tell how much this incident has scarred me, that I remember dates when silly news articles came out. And the week after, and then WhatsApp started spreading that there's a COVID in the delivery boy. In places as far away as Bangalore, which are 2,000 kilometers away, people stopped ordering pizza. That had no correlation to pizza being ordered in Bangalore, but of course, pizza sales fell off. What was even more illogical is burger, which has nothing to do with pizza. First of all, there's no logic for pizza in Bangalore having a problem if one delivery boy in Delhi has it. But pizza delivery fell 20% in Delhi and Bombay and every other place, and Bangalore and all of that. But what was worse is that burger fell by 40%. And I remember speaking to the head of Burger King. He was like, this is mad. First of all, neither pizza nor burger can spread COVID. Okay. But it happened in Delhi with pizza. And okay, pizza fell. You can logically say people are spooked. Maybe. But why is burger falling even higher than pizza? And when you speak to consumers, they'll say, ये pizza burger fast food वगैरह से होता है, and pizza at least garam होता है, but burger is not even heated as much because it has salad and stuff like that, right? So therefore they were applying logic on top of a misinformation to come up with a new logic as to why the Burger King business fell off a cliff. Their business fell off 80% already on a small base, right? So net, consumers were so spooked. And remember, I'll tell you what was happening in that point of time. While we were fighting all these operational battles, D's not being able to work because of e-passes, all of that stuff. Parallelly, we were running daily consumer voice of the consumer. I was attending daily consumer voice calls. I think for about 150 to 200 days, we kept up that routine. 150 to 200 days is, it's a lot, right? It's 3.5, 4 months of me leading a team of people, understanding what the consumer is feeling, because information, misinformation, feelings, beliefs, behaviors, practices was changing so rapidly that if you just did one survey, and sent a team to do a survey, by the time the survey results come back, people have a new belief. So we were doing daily stand-ups with my insights head, me, and understanding what's changing. And that is what we needed to, basically then we needed to have a system to filter the noise from the signal, and then to take the signal and put it into a business plan. So I want to talk to you about what eventually worked in terms of turning the tide of categories, people coming back into the category. To the extent, and the proof that it has worked is when the second wave has happened now, which is even crazier than the first wave in terms of the spike and how many people are affected and so on and so forth. The category exits is only 10%. Same time last year, 80% of home delivery food buyers left the platform, said, I'm not ordering, I'm going to get COVID. This time when the situation is far worse, only 10% have left. And even those 10% haven't left the category per se. They're just being a little cautious. They've dropped frequencies. They've shifted to non-food. Sometimes they've just gone to different cities, etc. So we really don't have any level of spooking this time on food delivery versus last time. And the proof of that is what happened in that first incident. So I'm going to try. I don't know if it's possible. I'm going to try this. If the technology doesn't work, I'll still voice it over. But I'm going to show you the ad and then tell you what this intense voice of the customer told us about what is going to change their mindset to come back to ordering food, as food is now safe to order. Between the delivery boy, the packaging, and the food itself, you're not going to get COVID. So I'm going to try that. Let's see if it works. My screen visible? Is the black screen visible?
Yes,
Yes.
we can see that.
The black screen is visible.
You see it?
Not sure for all. Video, I think, was a bit, video and audio was not syncing to each other.
Okay, wasn't visible, is it?
It was visible, but the audio and the video was not syncing to each other.
So I'm going to try playing it again and see if it works, or maybe play something else this time.
It might be the same thing would work, I suppose.
So I don't know how. I mean, I guess it was still bad, right, Adarsh?
Yes.
Video was
Yeah.
good. Audio wasn't there.
So let's just avoid that. The video was visible. If that was it visible?
Yes. Yes.
The video was there.
Okay, so let's just assume that first of all, this is you've got a nice audience. This is Swiggy user base. So I'm assuming some of you would have seen that ad. I mean, at least some of you would have seen this ad. It was played during the last IPL. But effectively, if you think about it, there is not. I'm sure you could see, even though you couldn't hear the voice. I mean, those of you who've seen the ad, of course, you know it. But there was not a single medical message, right? No claims that there is scientific proof. XYZ university has proven through a proper randomized controlled trial experiment that it doesn't cause it. None of that was there, right? It was a simple case of showing a neighbor looking at somebody and saying, you started ordering again. And the guy says, which world are you living in? Crores of people are ordering. Right? And that's really what it was. And of course, for those of us who are more familiar with Bollywood, you would know that they are famous Bollywood directors who actually are, and remember, Bombay was even worse affected in the first wave. I mean, they also had a bad second wave, but given the density and stuff like that, we had actually shown that. There was also another copy that we had shown with the famous Swiggy Mama, for those of you who are familiar with Swiggy Mama. But effectively, we realized that, and by the way, the answer to this question is that we actually used the most relevant consumer behavioral science insight that says you can keep hammering the science of why it's fine to order, but human beings are going to be shifting their behaviors, especially in a short duration period of time, on the basis of what is called social proof. Right? Habits will so there is a behavioral science bias. I mean, there's a whole body of knowledge on this one, but we found out that social proof is a bigger mover to make you change your behavior than somebody sending you. Why? Not because somebody is sending you junk. It's because first, you don't have the time to do research, and secondly, you're bombarded with A data and minus A data, so you don't know who to trust. WhatsApp University has basically got yin and yang both in it. Right? For every point, you will hear a counterpoint. Whether it's political or non-political, everything will be, you will get the plus and the minus, unless of course you've surrounded yourself in a complete echo chamber. So given that was never going to work. And frankly, who's going to listen to Swiggy telling them that food delivery is safe, right? So we decided to invest literally crores of rupees on a piece of TV campaign. And TV campaigns are expensive, on this insight that says, if you tell them that lots of neighbors are ordering, they will shift, because that was true. There were already lots of people ordering. I mean, the numbers weren't untrue that 1 crore people had ordered, and that just swung the needle. By the end of November, remember I said 80 people had walked away from Swiggy. Of the 80 people who had walked away from Swiggy, over 60 came back. I mean, and therefore the fortunes of the company swung like crazy in that period. And so for us, the rebirth, I mean, we were in sort of survive mode in the early part of the lockdown, but we really got back to our feet and started getting into, okay, now we can thrive in this phase of the lockdown. And therefore, when this new wave 2 has come, while it is painful and stuff like that, and we are obviously investing in, vaccination for our people and stuff like that, the reality is that the consumer is loving us. And because that has been established, that being consumer centric has helped us establish that the category is actually a better thing to order when you're locked in, as long as you follow the right norms, go to the right restaurants who have safety norms and, keep a distance from the delivery partner and blah, 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 blah. But effectively, we've been able to save it. Otherwise, we'll be back to square one, that we have this lockdown, and obviously Karnataka has done a lockdown again, and Bombay has done a lockdown again. We would have been back again to, dropping our revenues by 70, 80, 90%, right? So this, which means what? Now we are really worrying about, okay, let's worry about the third wave, and try to minimize it. Let's vaccinate our fleet. Let's continue to expand into new services and so on and so forth. And the other thing we also did when we were listening to the consumer, one was to revive the core business, which is food. The second was actually to get into new businesses. How did we do that? Every day I was hearing information from the consumer. Remember, this is literally lakhs of consumers that I was getting in a sometimes raw format, sometimes in a consolidated format, that says, we wish Swiggy could do this. We have this problem. In some cases, they would never talk about Swiggy. They would just say, we have a problem, because we were not polling them and saying, hello, we are from Swiggy. We would just say, how are you coping with the pandemic? So we would hear lots of problems. So what are all the services that we entered into during the last lockdown, with the fact that we had delivery partners, technology, and operations and consumer centricity? We entered into shipping books to consumers because everybody was locked in. We shipped medicines. We shipped chargers to people because they were stuck at home. We shipped, what else did we ship? Meat. We shipped flowers. We shipped, everything that could be shipped from place A to place B, we Swiggied it. Right? And we realized that many of these businesses will remain even after the pandemic. So when the unlock started happening, October, November, December, we realized a lot of these businesses have stayed with us. So we actually have, what we entered the pandemic with was largely one business, food. 99% of our business was food. But what we have exited the pandemic with, wave 1, and therefore now in wave 2, we are actually a multi-category business as a result of basically listening to the consumer and applying our strengths to that problem, is a grocery business, a meat business, a sort of obviously food business, and a whole host of things, right? Gourmet, anything that is allowed to be shipped by the government, we ship hyper locally, right? And the reason why we are obviously much more, desirable is if you run out of milk, you're not going to place an order with Big Basket and wait for it to come the next day, no? You need it then. So in half an hour, 40 minutes, you need it. If you run out of tomatoes and you wanted to make a dish, you're not going to wait till tomorrow, even if it's a brilliant delivery by the BB van. So BB does a different type of solution, which is planned, big. But in our case, when we are basically in a lockdown, hyper time sensitive, hyper local, multivariate, we are the people to serve. Right? So many schools are still using us right now to ship books to consumers as the new term begins. Right? They'll upload us the addresses of the students. They will basically say, send your boys to come to the library, pick up the books, and then go ship it to consumers. Right? Camlin was basically saying a lot of artists are feeling the pain. So can we ship art supplies to them? And we would go pick up and supply art to Camlin all over Bombay. I mean, to the artists all over Bombay. So I just wanted to stop there because I know we have 15, 20 minutes or so for questions. But this is a story that brings in the need for being intensely consumer sensitive. Remember the first part of the story where we talked about how we even distinguished ourselves from the crowd. We were a set of 40, how we thrived, and more importantly, how we sort of, survived the pandemic and actually have come out of the pandemic as even better, bigger, more profitable company than before. So we've actually come out of the pandemic bigger, better, and more profitable than before because of these services that we have. And it's literally as a result of just being customer centric. So I will, hi Nirav. I didn't know you were on the call. It's good. I should probably connect with you after this. So yeah, we can have questions here. We have 15, 20 minutes. By the way, I don't have a hard stop at 12. I can probably do another 10 extra minutes if needed. So, so we can just have questions. Karthik Hegde is saying deliveries can go wrong, be it late delivery or wrong order. How do you manage us to unhappy? So, I mean, Karthik, the answer is simple. We don't always, so to start with, we don't always do a good job of managing wrong order or late delivery. I mean, let me give you the perspective. By and large, we deliver lakhs of orders every night. By and large, most of them go right. Obviously, some go famously wrong. And there are two ways in which we manage it. One, of course, is try to manage it in situ while it's happening through an alternative delivery boy or through call center or through some gratification. But in many cases, we are not able to manage it, and so we have to do what is called post-order gratification, where we try to sort of gratify the customer after this happened. But importantly, we also then have a system by which every week we will record these errors and basically see what is the pattern and what is the root cause that is happening to be able to fix it. And sometimes we are able to fix it within a week, sometimes it takes longer. But the intensity of listening to the customer and trying to fix the problems is extremely short cycle, right? Because consumers don't have the patience that I mean, it's funny how consumers are so impatient that a 20-minute food delay will lead to blaming everybody under the sun, from local politician to us to whoever. I mean, consumers in India are amazing in that sense. So just telling them that there is a police bandobast that the Delhi driver is stuck in is still going to make them go angry. If you want to get depressed, just go and listen to the call center in Swiggy. All of them are just delayed by 20-30 minutes, but the consumers are talking as if the world has come crashing down, galis, etc., etc. And because we have a multilingual call center, I sometimes, and Mr. Shyam was reading out my multi sort of lingual. So I sometimes would do Kannada, Tamil, and all of that. And I would basically listen, depending on who I've listened to, I'd basically get my vocabulary of galis to improve on that language that I've done a call center call on. It's just funny how people are. So, Nitish is asking about competing with Dunzo. Yeah, I'm sure we compete with Dunzo, but I think we have an advantage that we have, which is that our peak is food. So 8 to 10 p.m. is super peak for us. All of our fleet is busy with that peak. So if you were to draw a graph, there is a big mountain at 8 to 10. That's not when people are trying to do shipment of goods. So we have actually a trough between lunch and dinner, which is underutilized. So you have delivery boys and girls underutilized. So that's when most people end up doing the Dunzo-like orders with Swiggy. So we actually have for us, because we are having complementary services, we actually have a cost advantage in terms of how we are able to deploy that, because as it so happened, very rarely are you going to order food, and during the food ordering process, order for groceries. So, so I think that's one advantage we have versus them who don't have that peak and trough system to basically do better capacity utilization. There are too many questions, so I'm going to just keep. So apologies if I'm skipping some questions, just because it's scrolling by. Shobita is saying parameters like best safety for restaurants are now available. How does Swiggy get a restaurant qualified? So we have 2-3 systems. We have a eight-step procedure to check it, that they have to meet to be able to qualify for best safety standards. They have to also send us a live video feed of their kitchens and stuff like that to prove that they are able to get the badge and retain the badge. So there's a whole process that is in place. And then there are physical audits also. I mean, right now we're locked down, but back when we were not, we were actually also having physical audits to make sure that the badge is retained. So a restaurant can't just get the badge and then, chill out. They have to every now and then keep showing that they are in sync. And I'm sure you know that. That's just how quality control works. What is the Swiggy model to retain delivery boys and keep them happy, especially during lockdown when lots of migration happened? Okay, so an interesting point of view that you may or may not know. I don't know which newspaper you read, but I would suspect that all of them are frankly useless. 99% of the delivery boys didn't go home. They stayed here. So the migration story did not affect people who were not scared about either having a job or unnecessarily spooked. Everybody stayed. We didn't have any problems whatsoever. We were giving them money even though they didn't have jobs. Remember, their consumers were COVID spooked, right? So despite not having any orders, and their pay really happens when they deliver orders, we were giving them minimum pay because we needed them to kind of chill out and stay in their homes, and they also needed to buy ration for their homes. So we were giving them minimum pay, etc. Most people didn't migrate. Though if those some that did migrate were basically told us that, look, I have a sick person at home and I want to go home, and so on and so forth. That's normal. That's manageable. We can manage what is called planned leaves for COVID, just like we do today for our white collar workforce. So I think it was fine. We sort of managed it well, which is why when the thing hit back, I mean, when we started spiking in September, October, November, we didn't have a problem in ramping up the delivery fleet because they were there. They were in the same cities that they were working in, and which for Bangalore, by the way, means that we have a very, very large number of people from East Indian states and North Indian states that are delivery boys, and they all stayed largely here, most of them. Rijil is saying, since you said biggest strength is the customer base and the database, you can do a lot of business, including finance and car sales promotions. I'm sure Rijil works in car sales. I can even imagine the campaign. Buy a burger and get a Mercedes for free or something like so. Car sales promotion, how and what are you doing new thing to engage the customer? See, one of the things you must be aware, very rarely would you be sent anything from Swiggy. In fact, very rarely or 0 times you'll be sent anything from Swiggy to sell anything other than food, right? I mean, for your customers, I'm sure you've never been given, as a Swiggy customer, you've never been given a car promotion or any other promotion. The reality is this: if you start, first of all, we don't have the expertise to sell finance, and secondly, if we do that as a side business, then it starts cannibalizing on why people come. I mean, it starts creating clutter. So we've tried to say, look, if you want to sell finance, you can do it for those who are interested in the tracking screen. So sometimes in the tracking screen, you can see some ads that are there, but we as a company are not pushing it. We have given them a space, and you can basically advertise if you want. Small percentage of population that is looking at the tracking screen might see it. That's an extra source of revenue. But as a core, we don't want to tell our food delivery players that, we know about cars or we know about finance. We're not going to push anything to. So in general, we stay away from it. But of course, there are cases where we offer it to you via a space in the. The point is, nobody is going to stay with us. I mean, almost nobody who's come to us for fast food delivery is going to stay with us because they got a discount on car sales. I mean, after you got your discount on car sales, then what? Why are they going to stay with us, right? You're really, in simple terms, you're going to stay with me if the original reason you came to me is something that makes you consistently happy. Now, if I add new services and make you happy as well, that's good, but it has got to be that job number 0 and job number 1 is the core reason for which you exist has to be done every day well. And that's when you will have loyalty. You can add new services like we have added Genie and Instamart, etc. But I don't think the food delivery people think that, great, you know what, now I'll have more loyalty just because Instamart is there. Food delivery people are worrying about how we can retain people without basically thinking somebody is going to come and help me. So I just thought I'll clarify that. How did you balance, despite a business loss, cost cutting, sustaining a full team in the face of COVID? Yeah, I mean, we did have cost cuts because remember we had COVID dormancy for 4, 5, 6 months. So we of course had cost cuts because everybody was doing it and we had to do our bit. But I think we did it late. We did it much later than everybody else, and we did it less than many people. That's the only thing we can feel sort of good about. I mean, I would still not like the cuts that we did, but back then there was almost no choice. We waited till as long as we could, and we basically did as little as we think we needed to have. Even that, in hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have done, but we didn't know we were going to have a recovery, and therefore we had to do a little bit of it because there was also investor relations to be managed, and of course everybody else is doing it. Why would you want to stand out? Because you don't know when this wave is going to end or when vaccines are going to come, so it's impossible to just stand out forever. So we did a little bit of it, but thankfully less than most of the people. Do you think Cloud Kitchen is something that will grow with increasing number of people ordering? Yeah, the simple answer to that question is yes. In the last 3 months, we have had 5,000 to 10,000 Cloud Kitchens open up. That's a very large number in a country like us, right? Because we operate in 500 cities. So that's an average of 10 Cloud Kitchens per city on average. And some cities, of course, have much more than that. And I think it's because restaurateurs have realized that, hey, in this new world, in the past, if I had to be a restaurateur, I needed to have 3 skills, honestly. Real estate skills. You cannot be a restaurateur if you basically have an absolutely either crappy location or an expensive or a great location, but a punitive rental, because it will kill your P&L. So you needed to be a real estate expert, right? You also needed to be a human resource expert because obviously you needed space for dining them and you needed to have a staff that serves them. And one of the biggest problems people had was staff, right? Because waiting staff is difficult to come by, and it's a pain to manage a very large workforce there. And the third one, of course, is the kitchen, which is the culinary stuff. Now restaurateurs have realized that I can still be a great restaurateur with only 1 out of the 3 headaches, and therefore focus on the core, which is food and culinary, and everything else can be done through cloud. So I think that has meant that lots of entrepreneurs who basically were either not having the capital or the expertise to do the other two things and therefore become restaurateurs have come into the restauranting business. So there's fantastic new restaurants that have opened up. Most consumers that are ordering from those restaurants don't know that there is no physical restaurant that they can go to after lockdown ends. Some of those restaurants just exist on the cloud. So when lockdown ends and you say, oh, I've been having this amazing pizza, I want to go there and physically have it, you'll find it doesn't exist. That, right? So because it's a cloud kitchen. So that's definitely happened. Is Swiggy getting in? So yeah, we have some private brands and kitchens. I think there was a question around private brands and kitchens as well. But it is done to basically expand the market and not compete with existing people. You'll notice that we don't do biryanis ourselves because there's enough biryani players that are there. The market is vibrant enough. We also notice we don't do, dosas and idlis and stuff like that because there's enough supply of the restaurants. Wherever there's a supply gap, we try to get into that and fill that supply gap. And then, of course, restaurateurs and entrepreneurs follow. But we are not in the business of creating something that needs to compete with the restaurant. We are just essentially filling supply gaps as opposed to trying to compete with the restaurants. We would never do that. So that's sort of that. What is the frequency of COVID test for delivery staff? Well, to start with, we have obviously in places where it was mandatory, it was once every 2 weeks. Temperature testing is twice a day. And it's once every 2 weeks. Is the RT-PCR. We don't, because RT-PCR is the more robust one. But there was a time when governments were telling us, don't keep doing it. These are fit people. You are wasting RT-PCR because people were taking 3, 4 days to get the RT-PCR results. Thankfully, that phase coincided with the vaccination phase. So we've started obviously vaccinating our staff. So, a few thousand staff, for example, in Bangalore have completed their vaccination. So once we finish vaccination for our staff, then this problem will also reduce of not being able to do RT-PCR that frequently. But we do temperature test twice and we are vaccinating the staff. So that should take care of the problems. And of course, we have contactless delivery. So there's no this sort of do gaj ki duri with the consumer. There's a question from Rakesh on the example where a customer took social media to make a big impact. I assume this is a customer from Bangalore, and I assume you're referring to the Zomato case where there was a case where the social media influencer was complaining that the delivery boy had hit her. I mean, you know where that case went, right? I mean, it eventually went to a place where it was proven that it was not necessarily a true complaint, and it was just a unfortunate case of a delivery boy being taken advantage of. So that ended. But how big is the challenge? Every now and then we get this. I mean, we had a case in Bombay where somebody tweeted and tagged the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Mumbai Police, National Commission of Women. I mean, I think the only person left to be tagged there was United Nations. And they complained about the fact that the delivery boy was threatening her, and she lives alone. But when we investigated, our investigation is thorough. It basically works with the police, and we listened to all the audio clips. And when we listened to it, we found that this is not the case. She was basically doing that. She was lying, right? Basically, what had happened was she had asked the delivery boy to come in the middle of the night, and along with the food, also get cigarettes along for her boyfriend. The delivery boy refused, and he said, "I'm sorry, sir, that is not something that is permitted. I'm not going to do it." There was an argument. He finally said, "Okay, since you're arguing and you're basically willing to pay me some money, I'll get it." He got it. He didn't get the money. He got really irritated. Said, "In the middle of the night, you're asking me to get cigarettes. I did it as a favor, and now you're basically not giving me the money." And there was a big argument that ensued. And of course, in that argument, obviously there was galis given on both sides. And then next thing we know is that there's a tweet. Thankfully, everything was recorded on one phone. So when we listened to the transcripts, we gently told the lady that, "Look, we have listened to all the voice transcripts. I think you may be mistaken on whose fault it was. We request you to not accuse a poor delivery boy of his livelihood, because if it was proven that he had done something wrong, we would have had to fire him. So we've just temporarily taken him off pending investigation. Please." So she withdrew her tweet and the matter ended. But it's just silly how consumers take advantage. And we also sometimes make mistakes in either punishing or not punishing delivery boys. It's a challenge. We don't always get it right, but it's a constant challenge. It's 12 now. I know, Adarsh, you said we can do 15-20 minutes of questions. There are more questions coming. I'm, like I said, happy to go on, but I do realize that impinging on 150 people, 170 people to stay longer is too much. So as an MC, I'd let you decide what you want to do. I'm happy to stay, but I don't wish for that to mean 170 people have to stay.
You can take one more question, then we'll make it end.
Okay.
Last question.
So last question is...
which of your strategies can emulate in line with process, people, technology?
Okay. That's Vignesh's question.
Yes, sir.
Which of your strategies can which of your strategies we can emulate in line with people, process, technology that also become a verb as mentioned by you. I was maybe I was talking to Mr. Sham about the fact that, even though I'm an engineer and I believe I'm a reasonably technologically savvy engineer and blah, 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 my car that I finally bought was actually bought not because the technology was the best, but because the salesperson, in this case, the sales lady, was from, I think she's from a small suburb. Either she's from Sakleshpur or from a small suburb of Mysore, a small town outside Mysore, I forget now. This is now 3 years ago. Was so amazing in the way she dealt with my unique needs and the way she dealt with me well after she had basically sold me the product. I mean, for 2 years after the car had been sold, and remember, she's in sales, not in customer service. She was still the person. She said, sir, I know you can call the call center and do that, but sir, you are my customer. Call me, I'll do the needful for you. I don't think that was the process for that car company. I think there was a customer service, but she would just tell me to deal with it. And even in cases where I had talked directly to the customer service, I think she had a system where they would tell her that her customer had made a complaint. So she would call me and she would say, I heard your car had a problem with the back, the automatic boot. So why didn't you tell me, sir? I said, look, it works. I can just call somebody. It just works. They came and took my car and tomorrow they'll deliver it. She said, no problem, sir. I'll follow up and make sure that it's there. Now, the point I'm making is, when you're spending lakhs on a car, you would tend to assume that the brake horsepower and revs and the torque and all of that is more important, or maybe the quality of the fittings. But honestly, if you're between a certain band of cars, there isn't that much of a difference. Just like between the 3 best detergents, there isn't that much of a difference, right? So the differentiator can often be something which is intangible. So I do think that in your case, you can leverage technology a lot more to have a relationship with the customer. Today, in today's world, there is no reason why the customer cannot. Obviously, my car is smart enough to tell me when something is wrong, right? Because it's obviously a car that has sensors to tell me that something is wrong, whether it's something as silly as air pressure or something more serious, it tells me that. And many smart cars have that. But the fact that it tells my phone and it also tells the garage, and therefore it tells my human who basically, hey, sir, I know you have to bring it in here, but these are tough times. And you're in a containment zone too. Do you want me to just figure a way where we can have somebody pick it up? He will come in PPE kit. If somebody calls you and tells you that and says, we'll come to your house in a PPE kit and take your car, you don't have to bring it after the containment. Because my logic was the containment zone ends in 10 days. I'll bring the car then. It's okay. I'm anyway stuck at home. So you're taking that little extra mile. I genuinely think that my next car I'll buy from her if she's still in the same job. Right? Because car is a car. It drives well, right? I mean, and I, by the way, test drove pretty much all the top 3-4 cars, European and American cars. So I think that you could probably leverage technology and the human customer centricity aspect to build a bridge where people, where, for example, in this particular case, I don't know the details of it. Sure, the purchase of a car can today be done online, right? And I'm sure you're aware that Mercedes has sold a lot of cars online. But if the relationship that Akshaya Motors executives have with the customer, leveraging technology, so I'm not talking a pure people process, is such that the customer is always delighted and you're always one step ahead of the customer. I think that you will basically create a bond that, first will be something that the rest of the world will want to emulate. And second will be something that will make Mercedes the company, and I know there may be people from Mercedes company here, I don't pretend to know your industry, will basically say that's an amazing sort of yin and yang, that we actually have technology doing what technology can best can, and we have people with the relationship leveraging the technology and doing what people can best can. So I mean, not that I'm an expert on this one, but as a single buyer of a single car over the last 3-4 years, I can say the power of technology at an individual customer level, coupled with good human processes, is an absolutely unbeatable combination.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek, for the wonderful session, which had a lot of messages. I think we do not have much time to go through all the messages.
Yeah,
a lot of thank you messages also. And actually, to sum it up, I think 2 clear message. That one, customer's thoughts. You started with saying Colgate example of 1930. You make the customer think what you want them to do. And you started by saying you took customers' verbatim to change Swiggy in 2020. And that had a time, 150 days to 180 days. So give time to whatever you want to change. is what another thought you put across. And you said a lot of technology can come in, but it's a human intervention which makes one-to-one customer experience better. That will change the direction. So a lot of things, in reference of, to sum it up, we have given a lot of good insight to how we can day-to-day work in our customer interface. Thank you so much, Mr. Vivek. And Shyam sir, would you just want to close the session, sir, with that?
Vivek, thank you so much for, first of all, agreeing and coming on this webinar to talk to our teams, and everybody else who was there. It was a very informative session. Thank you so much. You started with the history of Swiggy, how it started in 2014, and in 2018, how you increased it from 8 cities to 550 cities in about 1.5 years. The emphasis that you paid on process, people, and technology, the new segments that you kind of found out, other than food delivery, grocery, or it could be. That means diversification of business. You made sure that you provided mobility from point to point for not only food delivery, for grocery, medicines, etc., etc. And you made Swiggy bigger, better, and more profitable. Okay. And I'm amazed that lakhs of orders are delivered every day using technology, using people. It's amazing what you're doing. And, overall, I think it was an excellent session, a lot of learning. And thank you so much for agreeing and coming on this webinar. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the time. And it's a pleasure. I wish I had done it in person, but I'm sure we are hopefully seeing the end of this wave. I would love to just come and meet your team, but because
Sure.
I love technology, but I think, face-to-face is still great.
Yeah. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you everyone for attending this session.